Thank you. Your comments? Well, there we are, gentleman there. Yeah, it's just on its way. If you could identify yourself too, that would help.
John Bird from C Electric UK. We're the distribution business for the North East and Yorkshire. Very interested in what Greg was saying about the need for investment, massive amounts of investment. That was the question I put to Alistair Darling this morning. So I'd really like to ask a question or raise an issue about the smaller scale that's already been mentioned by several members of the panel. Smaller scale activity, whether it's generation, whether it's energy efficiency, is clearly going to be a very important part of the overall picture. But there is a difficulty with moving to the smaller scale in providing people with information, both customers, and we talked about installers there, making sure they get the adequate training. I think this is going to require a much greater investment from the public sector in terms of just making information available. We have a feed-in tariff coming in a few weeks' time. We have a carbon reduction commitment coming in as well, and I think it's pretty clear that still the vast majority of companies that are going to be affected by that are still not really aware of what's going to hit them. What can be done to improve that information gap and, in fact, dealing with the skills gap as well?
Great.
Sure, let me deal with that. And perhaps I could just pick up a couple of things that Alan said. I completely agree. And when it comes to energy efficiency, I think just providing information, I don't think is enough. I mean, if it were sufficient, then every home in the country would be at the optimal standard of energy efficiency on economic grounds, let alone CO2 grounds. And we have this kind of real paradox in this country, where we have some of the least energy efficient homes in Europe. And it's the case that investments in even quite basic energy efficiency improvements, like cavity wall, loft insulation, and even some of the more sophisticated ones, pay for themselves within 2 or 3 or 4 years, quite reliably. Yet people don't do it, despite the information campaigns. And, you know, on the face of it, this might seem to be sort of rather bizarre that people don't. But actually, if you kind of think about it, I think this is how policy should be directed, to try to solve problems. You know, why is it that people don't upgrade? Why don't we all upgrade our homes to be the optimal standard? Well, one of the reasons is that, you know, it might only cost, say, £1,000 to have a package of energy efficiency improvements that might save you, you know, £300 a year once you've done it. But there are many people in this country who simply can't lay their hands on £1,000 up front for that. It's completely impossible. They certainly don't have that in their bank account. There are other people who may be concerned that, you know, if they've got their home, probably their most important asset, they don't want some sort of random person messing about with it and perhaps sort of destroying the fabric. They might be worried about the risks of that. Or they may be worried that if they engage in investment, then they may move house before they get the returns on it. So I think if you think about this, you can come up with solutions. So one of the proposals that we've made, and again, I think it's increasingly enjoying cross-party support, is the idea that if you can make savings through energy efficiency, why not find a way to advance those savings so people can get it done up front? We've called it the Green Deal, and there are lots of retailers and energy companies who we want to participate, basically, in giving an entitlement to every household in the country to have up to £6,500 worth of energy efficiency improvements done. The cost recovered over a 25-year period from the bill. But you only get it done if it's been audited and established that even on very conservative assumptions, it's going to pay for itself in way before that time. Now, if you do that, then you overcome some of those obstacles. You need to talk about it, you need to publicise it. But actually, if you've got installers who can identify this as a new market, then they'll have a motivation to go and persuade people. People often say that products that have a stream of benefits into the future are sold rather than bought. And I think that's the case here. I think, you know, persuading people of the advantages is key. So you can do that, and you can have a kind of great expansion of the possibilities there. And in so doing, it'll take obviously some time to expand the installer base to be able to cope with it. But one of the things that we've said to be accredited as an approved supplier, which addresses some of the risk point of view, is that 1 in 10 of the installing employees should be apprentices. So you have to have an apprenticeship program. So you're building the skills that you need for the future. So that's a kind of practical way in which I think you can address that point. Will you indulge me if I just pick up very briefly?
Well, I think a lot of people are interested in the question of whether environment has kind of dropped down the agenda. Sure. I mean, it wasn't in your new posters, for example.
I don't think the process is finished yet, Adam, so watch this space. I think everyone here knows that right from part of David Cameron's mandate for his leadership was that he was going to take environmentalism seriously. When he appointed me to this role, as you'll see in the manifesto when it's published, it's pretty central to it. And the climate change bill that we had that had cross-party support, I think all wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had this agreement. There was a survey, Alan's quite right, there was a survey of candidates. It was, I think it's a symptom, anyone in the room who's been a parliamentary candidate will know. I think the survey question asked people what was the most important issue on the doorstep for people in their campaigns at the moment. And if you've been fighting your seat for 3 or 4 years and you're reporting back on that, perhaps it's the case that people are talking about the closure of their local hospital or something to do with their school, if it's the most important. So I don't think it reflects any wavering of commitment, far from it. In fact, for the reasons that I sort of briefly mentioned in my speech, when it comes to energy security, when it comes to dependence on imported fossil fuel, I think there's an increasing consensus that actually you do need to wean yourself off these high carbon sources. On Europe, Alan's absolutely right. I think a lot of this has to be done at a European level. Our security of supply will be enhanced the more interconnected we are with the rest of Europe. It's one of the areas we have disagreements with some of the government policy on Europe when it comes to having the Lisbon Treaty and the Foreign Affairs representative and all the rest of it. But when it comes to energy markets and cross-European action to liberalise energy markets, to make ourselves more connected, this is an area we should be leading on and we should be fighting in Europe for. I quite agree with that. And on the regional body, which I know is a concern that I think has been raised earlier in the day, look, I think there are going to be different solutions that apply to different parts of the world. In the southeast of England, for example, the region officially extends from Milton Keynes to Dover. There are very few connections between Milton Keynes and Dover, and it's understandable that I think people don't want a regional development agency of that sort. But I think, I've always sensed, through growing up here and through my work as Shadow Minister for Teesside, that actually there is a sense that the North-East as a region...
So, have you declared war on the North-East, or more particularly on the Regional Development Agency?
No, I think what I'm going on to say, Adam, is I think you have different solutions in different parts of the world. The idea of declaring war on the North-East,
yeah,
I think that we might have been struggling with...
Is okay, the Regional Development Agency would survive in a
What we've said, we have one of the things that if we are elected, a Conservative government wants to do, is to take power away from Whitehall, from ministers declaring what the arrangements will be in a uniform terms across the country, and giving it back to local people. And so if it's the case that the authorities here think it's right, and I suspect they might, to have a continuing economic development agency, they're absolutely free to have that.